This is a lesson over 3.5, the structures and functions that allow organisms to self-regulate. The topics that you will learn about are cold-blooded versus warm-blooded organisms, homeostasis, and diffusion and osmosis. Cold versus warm-blooded. Cold-blooded organisms take on the temperature of their surroundings. When it's hot outside, cold-blooded organisms are hot in temperature. If it's 100 degrees outside, a snake is going to be 100 degrees in temperature. When it's cold outside, cold-blooded organisms are cold. So when it's 0 degrees out, that snake is 0 degrees. Warm-blooded organisms are able to maintain a stable internal temperature. That means when it's 0 degrees outside, you are able to maintain a temperature of about 98.6 degrees. If it's 100 degrees outside, you are still going to maintain a temperature of about 98.6 degrees. One thing to note is that internal temperatures can differ with organisms. Humans might have an internal temperature of 98.6 degrees, while dogs have a normal internal temperature of 101.5 degrees. These are some images of warm-blooded organisms. You can see the background of the picture is very cold. I know that because it's black. The warm-blooded organisms come up in purple and red and orange and yellow. They're warmer than their surroundings. These are some images of cold-blooded organisms. In the very first picture, you'll notice that the cold-blooded organism is a little bit warmer than their surroundings. That might be because they just came off of a heat rock, or maybe they came out from under a heat lamp. The second picture of the lizard, you can see that the organism is the same temperature of their surrounding, that purplish color. The third picture of the scorpion is another great picture because you can see that the scorpion's black and the background is also black. Homeostasis. Homeostasis is a state of balance or equilibrium. In humans, homeostasis means keeping the balance of our body temperature. But that's not all it includes. It also includes the pH of our blood. It includes the amount of oxygen that's carried in our blood. And there are many other things that our body is trying to keep in balance in order to support the survival of our cells. Like I said, body temperature is an example of homeostasis because it's a human's body that regulates its own temperature. It is not the only example of homeostasis. So homeostasis is a balancing act. It can include our body temperature. It can also include things like blood glucose level, which is the amount of sugar that's in your blood. Insulin, made by our pancreas, helps balance the amount of glucose or sugar that's in our blood. Our body also regulates the amount of red blood cells that we have circulating around our body. This is why we are able to give blood up to a certain amount, and our body can recreate it within 24 hours. Diffusion and osmosis. Diffusion is the process where molecules move from one area to another based on the concentration of a substance. Osmosis is the diffusion of water into or out of the cell. Diffusion and osmosis are very, very similar. In order for either one of them to happen, the cell membrane has to be permeable, which means things can pass in and out of it. I like to think of the cell membrane as Swiss cheese. It's holy. It can let things in and out of it. These are some images of diffusion and osmosis. In most of the pictures, in the two pictures of osmosis, you'll notice that there is the semi-permeable membrane, which allows the sugar in the water to move through the membrane. You'll also notice that The low concentration is always moving toward the high concentration. There are also some examples of red blood cells. The isotonic medium red blood cell is perfect. You can see water is equal on the inside and the outside of that cell. The hypertonic example of a red blood cell is not a good example. You can see that water is leaving the cell, which is why it's looking all shriveled and clumped up. Finally, there's a hypotonic example of a red blood cell. This is also another bad example of a blood cell. All the water is entering into it, and so it makes it look swollen or blown up.